scripture for today is from Zechariah 4, 5 to 10. Then the angel who spoke with me answered me, "Do you not know what these are?" I said, "No, my Lord." He said to me, "This is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord of hosts. What are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel you shall become a plain, and he shall bring out the top stones amid shouts of grace, grace to it." Moreover, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, "The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands shall also complete it. Then you will know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. For whoever has despised the day of the small things shall rejoice and see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel." The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Well, it is the beginning of a new year. How many of you made resolutions? A handful of us. I think they're great. I really do. I think that resolutions are goals. Goals in life are important. And I think all of us should have some goals, whether it's just to retire, whatever it is, and bucket list, whatever you want to call it. But the thing about resolutions is we usually tend to write down some big change we want to make, some big thing we want to accomplish. And then we all know what the success rate is of New Year's resolutions, right? Most are forgotten by the end of January. Yeah, that's true. Like 80% of people have forgotten them by the end of January, and by February, even less people. I know you did. Grace has a great story from last year. She actually made a resolution to read a chapter every night of the Bible and then write a summary of it. And she did it.
And I did it.
Yeah.
The problem is, I had to wait till I was 75 to figure out that I should do it. I learned so much. I started with Samuel because that's what Tinker was preaching on at the time. So I did all the historical books, and then I just did Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus, and I thought, no. So I'm starting with Matthew tonight.
Had enough of the numbers. Yes, Maggie?
I'm just going to share mine. My resolution was I've never read the Bible from cover to cover. And I did that. And I finished. I finished Revelation yesterday.
Yay! Awesome! Awesome. That is awesome. Well, the thing about resolutions is we tend, like I said, to make these big changes. We want to make a big change, but the fact is that if that's all we have is this big change, chances are we're not going to accomplish it because we need smaller steps to get there. But when we do our New Year's resolutions, we don't tend to write down how I'm going to get there. We don't tend to write down all those small steps that it takes to actually accomplish our resolution. And today that's what we're going to talk about, is small steps. How small steps, with God's help, leads to big results. And so we're going to actually talk for all of this month, we're going to talk about the rebuilding of the temple, the second temple, which was actually kind of the third temple. But that's getting very minutiae. But there was the tent, then there was the first temple, and then the second temple. And there's yet to be a third temple. So just keep that all in mind. Right now there's another building on it. But the second temple, there were 4 different prophets involved with the second temple. And we're going to talk about 2 of them. And that's Zechariah and Haggai. And most people talk about Ezra and Nehemiah, and there's some great stuff. I actually really, really like those 2 books. If you're looking for some leadership information, there's some great stuff in those 2 books. But Zechariah and Haggai usually get skipped over, so we're going to talk about those because they tended to be at a different time point than the other 2. And so let's just get some background. Understand today's verse, chapters. the Zerubbabel, to understand what Bryce read for us, we need quite a bit of background information. And can everybody hear me? I feel like I'm having to holler pretty loud. Can you turn me up just a tiny bit? Thank you, since I can't turn myself up. I hope it's just the battery. I did accidentally leave it on because I was so excited about it. So hopefully it'll work. So background info. Okay, that may be a little too loud. All right, background info. We had one kingdom, right? Israel was split in two, northern kingdom, southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was defeated by the Assyrians. And the northern kingdom is not where Jerusalem was. Jerusalem's in Judah, which is the southern kingdom. So when the Assyrians came and they defeated the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom got a little nervous. And so they started taking stuff out of the temple and hiring mercenaries. So they're starting to deplete their resources. Because of course if they took something out of the temple, then they got taxed extra to put stuff back in the temple. And so the people are dealing with the fact that one of their trade partners is gone. They've taken stuff out of the temple. They're now getting taxed to put stuff back into the temple, and they're nervous. Then the Babylonians come. And the Babylonians surround Jerusalem. First, they start taking all the major cities and kind of just taking everything out around Jerusalem. And so now the people in Jerusalem don't have anyone to trade with. They have to be nervous about going out and getting stuff. They can't go out and get livestock. They can't go out, anything they've got planted outside of the walls. They've got to be nervous because there's an army out there. So you can imagine that their resources, their wealth is diminishing. Then eventually the Babylonians come and they surround Jerusalem. Literally, like right up against the wall, surround Jerusalem. So of course nothing's getting in and out. And they do this for over 18 months. Needless to say, the food supply ran out. They ran out of food. And they ran out of a ton of things. Just a ton of things, everything. So you imagine the people are becoming more and more impoverished. Then the Babylonians finally take the city of Jerusalem, and when they do, they plunder it. They take everything the people had, and then they decide to destroy the city and just turn it into rubble, and including the temple. Matter of fact, you can read in the scriptures where they had burned the temple, and the temple was coated with gold in spots. And they'd stripped the gold down, but when they burned it down, when they turned it into a pile of rubble, some of the gold actually melted and people were sifting through the ashes looking for gold. And so it's just terrible. They've gone through months and months and months of war. They have nothing left. Their homes have been destroyed. Many of them have lost members of their family from war. And now the Babylonians take them and move them and scatter them all over, but not in Jerusalem. Imagine what that feels like. To be taken from your homeland after war. I bet Luda could tell us quite a bit of what it feels like to end up in a country and you don't speak the language, you've lost so much. It's got to be just terrible. And you're starting over. Everything. You're put in some place and you've now got to somehow come up with a new way of making a living and making a home maybe. You know, it's possible you were given some square to say this is going to be your home, but it has been ransacked and pillaged by the Babylonians before, and so you've got to rebuild. So at some point, though, the Persians take out the Babylonians, and the Persian king says to the Israelites, who are now scattered everywhere, you can go home. you can go home and you can rebuild your temple and rebuild in your city. Now this is 70 years later. Those that remember have got to be at least 75. I don't know about you guys, but I don't have very many memories before I was 5. So how many of them even care? And some of them don't even care. I don't remember it, wasn't born there, don't know anything about it, and you're going to ask me to leave what little bit I have finally rebuilt and go start all over in a city that's in ruins. But some decide to do it. There are those that either remember or have heard from their parents and their grandparents, and it matters to them to have their homeland. So they return and they start trying to rebuild the temple. Now, mind you, this temple was built during the time of King Solomon. His dad, King David, had stockpiled all the supplies for it. And then Solomon hired 150,000 men to build this temple. And he had a huge, huge bank account. He had unlimited resources. So 150,000 men built this temple. Less than 50,000 people, including men, women, and children, returned to Jerusalem. Less than 50,000. And so they're looking at what used to be their house, which is now a pile of rubble, and they did what was right. They concentrated on building their homes, replanting all the vineyards that are gone, building their livestock back up, reestablishing trade, and all the time, of course, having to send taxes to the Persian king. So you can imagine having to start over like that, the amount of time it took them to get back on their feet. It took some time. And as they continued to concentrate on that, the prophets started coming and saying, this is great. You should do that. But maybe it's time to start thinking about your spiritual lives too. You're kind of getting so focused on getting your feet back under you that you're forgetting the important part, your spiritual life. So let's rebuild that temple. So they start trying to work on the temple, and they find it's just too hard. I mean, they don't have 150,000 people. They don't have unlimited wealth. And on top of it, the people that were moved there when they left are harassing them and sabotaging their work. 23 years later, they still haven't gotten much done. So 23 years later, they just decided, this is too much. This is just too discouraging. It's impossible. It's just impossible. We can't do it. We just can't do it. And that's when our prophets come in, including Zechariah, who says to the people, you can do this. You're not going to do it by your might. You're not going to do it by your wealth. But you can do it by my Spirit. That's the only way it's going to get done, is through my Spirit. As a matter of fact, if you use my Spirit, I can take mountains and turn them into plains. And if you've ever seen what God did to Amarillo, He can make it flat. He can make it flat. So God makes that promise through these two prophets, Zechariah and Haggai. Today we read Zechariah, that they can rebuild as long as they don't focus on what they have, if they will just do the small things. He says, don't despise the small things. The day of the small things is what he says. Because that's what's happening to these people. They're sitting there and they're looking at the work they've done and they're thinking, we're not getting anywhere. It's been 23 years we haven't gotten anywhere, we're not doing anything, we're not accomplishing anything, let's just call it quits. And God says, don't despise those small things. If we'll keep God in mind, God can take small things and turn them into big things. And God promises that if He started something, He'll finish it. He makes that promise in that passage as well. If God starts the work, He'll finish it. But we have to continue with the small steps. And most of us want the miracle. We want God to come and just wave the wand and up goes the temple and we didn't have to do much work, right? But God says we need to do the small things. It's the small things that really make the difference. I want to share a story with you guys from, this is a story I shared a long time ago, but it's been long enough, hopefully you don't all remember it. They say within a year you know all your pastor's stories. I've tried to portion mine out so that you don't have them all, but we're going to have to repeat one. This little girl's named Haiti, and she had decided one day she wanted to go to Sunday school, and so she was sadly running late, ended up going to this local church, and when she got there, went to Sunday school, of course everybody has their chair, right? I mean, we've got a handful of you guys that always sit in the same chair, but most of you sit in the same chair. And come to find out, Sunday schools will do that too. And so the little girl got to Sunday school and everybody had already sat in their chair and there was nowhere for her to sit. The room was packed. Boy, don't you wish we had that problem. The room was packed. And so she had to stand during Sunday school against the wall. But she came a couple more times and then suddenly she quit coming. And then the mom contacted the pastor and said, Haiti has passed away. We'd like for you to do her service, but she also left something for the church. And of course the pastor said, of course I'll do the service. And he couldn't imagine what did she leave for the church. And so he meets with the mother, and the mother pulls out a little coin purse that Haiti had, and in it she had collected 57 cents. 57 cents. So that the church could expand the Sunday school so that she would have everybody would have a place to sit. Now, if I had been treasurer that day, I think I'd have taken that 57 cents and thrown it in the offering plate and wrapped it with, the little coin wraps and stuff, and off to the bank it would have gone, and I wouldn't have thought of that. But this was a wise pastor, and he took that 57 cents and he turned it into pennies, and then he shared the story with the congregation, and he auctioned off each one of those pennies. And he raised $250. And with that $250, they bought the house that was right next to the church. It tells you this was a long time ago. This was in Pennsylvania, by the way. So they bought the house next to the church, and then they moved the Sunday school over into this house. They modified it and moved the Sunday school over into this building. And can you believe they outgrew it? They outgrew that building. And they built another church and moved their Sunday school into the other church. And now they've got this empty building. He thought, you know what we should do? We should have classes for those that want to become pastors. And we'll make that into a college. And they called it Temple College. And eventually it outgrew that building and became Temple University. It's a true story. And they eventually did move that building as well. So that's how Temple University started, from 57 cents. Now, this wasn't a 57 cents that just magically turned into Temple University. It was 57 cents that step by step by step became Temple University. As a matter of fact, I have a feeling if you had taken that 57 cents that first day and said, someday we're going to build a university with this, what would we have done? laughed. We might have even laughed about turning it into a Sunday school room. But they just trusted that if they did their part, God would do God's part. So step by step, God does big things. But we have to start with all those small steps. I think about the Grand Canyon. It didn't start that way, did it? It took time, didn't it? The water came in, and of course there's more to the Grand Canyon than just the water forming it, but the water just, over time, kept eating away and eating away and eating away. I got a little time-lapse video here. This is a salt block with water on it. Is it running?
Should be. Maybe. Okay.
It's time-lapse. I want you to notice at the beginning, it seemed like nothing was happening. And how many times do we quit a project because we feel like nothing's happening? And yet, if we'll just continue with that small step, that small drip, over time, we get our Grand Canyon. It leads to something else. You know, I look at this church and I think, man, we do have a lot of empty seats. We got a tight budget. We got a lot of things that maybe don't work. But I truly believe that God's not done with New Covenant. I truly believe there are some churches that God kind of says, you know what, it's time to just, churches have lifespans. They truly do, and I think there are some that sometimes God just says, let's let that one go. But I don't feel that here. I don't know about you guys, but I feel energy here. I feel something here. And then I look at all you guys and all the talent that God has put in this room. Man, it's amazing. You have no idea. I mean, it's just, because I hear from all of you, and I find out all of your backgrounds, and I go, wow, we don't even have to start with little small steps. We got big stuff here. But we need to start with the small steps and trust God with the big steps. Because if we just look at our resources, if we just look around us, we might start kind of thinking, what can we do? Can we grow? Can we get families in here? I think we can. I think if we start taking those small steps, God will do the rest. All we have to do is just believe in God. We don't have to believe in the steps. We don't have to believe even in the big result. All we have to do is believe in the big God and take the small steps. So let's concentrate on taking those small steps. Amen?